Standing by the Prince of Darkness' side for decades was Sharon Osbourne. Something very private, nevertheless, was taking place beneath the surface of the heavy metal legacy and gothic mayhem. Sharon, at 72 years old, has spoken out about Ozzy's dying days for the first time, sharing revelations that shocked everyone. In what ways were love, treachery, and power all factors in his demise? Learn the hidden details of Ozzy's last chapter in this film, including how he passed away, the decision-makers involved, and the familial dynamics that supported them. The one woman who knew Ozzy best staged a hauntingly lyrical farewell, which included harsh truths and legal twists. Ozzy Osbourne's demise was not unexpected, rather, it was part of a larger plot. Nowhere, not for his loved ones nor for Sharon Osbourne. Even though the public was shocked by the official news that came out on July 22, his closest associates had been getting ready for months. A hidden, methodical framework had been constructed, layer by layer, behind the curtain of rock iconography and public quiet by the one person who had managed every significant event of his life, Sharon. Not to mention that it wasn't based on terror. Its foundation was control. Respiratory failure as a result of late-stage Parkinson's disease complications was the last cause of death. Disease. The internal management even extended to that diagnosis. The public first heard of Ozzy's deterioration and Parkinsonian tremors in the late 20th century. When the disease reached its terminal stage in 2025, the patient's ability to speak was completely gone, their motor skills were severely impaired, and they required constant medical attention. In response, Sharon established in their Buckinghamshire home what can only be a private medical fortress, a full care model that is legally protected. Every detail was meticulously attended to. As the months drew to a close, Sharon oversaw Ozzy's medical transition, which involved 3 rotating teams, one to provide neurological support, one to assist with motor therapy, and one to manage his pain. Experienced professionals, employed as full-time high-level private specialists, many of whom were required to sign strict secrecy agreements, were involved. They were not part-time consultants. After having their paperwork reviewed by an attorney, they came up with an operating schedule that sounded a lot like one used in a hospital's intensive care unit, except that it was implemented solely in the comfort of their own home. Gatherings of family members began in early July. Everyone in the family remained calm and collected. There were no rumors, leaks, or sudden fear. This was done on purpose, following a predetermined and authorized plan. When Ozzy passed away, Sharon's first priority was to respect his desire for total seclusion by keeping him out of the spotlight. Even old friends and partners were prohibited from the press, and Sharon rejected all press inquiries 72 hours prior to the public declaration. The press was so excluded. Nothing came out of the family until Sharon gave her approval, and the lawyers handled everything else. The enormous machine operating silently behind the scenes was not captured by this beautiful declaration of a passing, which was already tinged with initial shock. He died at home, in peace, with his family. By including digital health monitoring, an estate-ready infrastructure, coordination of funeral arrangements, and other features, Sharon had converted their home into a fully operational hospice. Even the location of his last resting place, a private family burial plot, was reserved and arranged long ago, according to the family's legal documents, all while the press and public remained in the dark. However, Jack Osbourne's semi-public reply provided the most intimate detail. Just 3 days before he passed away, Ozzy had a last video chat with his kids, saying farewell with just his expressions and eye contact since he couldn't find the right words. It was well-planned if unspectacular. It was obvious to him. Even though all 3 kids were present for that final goodbye, only Sharon was asked to spend his dying hours with father. There was no transfer. There was no assistance from machinery, Sharon said in a personal message that was attached to the press release. It may sound straightforward from a medical perspective, but that declaration carried significant weight from a legal and emotional standpoint, and nothing was done against Ozzy's wishes. It proved that the choices he made in his dying days weren't prompted by a lack of time or serious illness. They were deliberate actions. The death of Ozzy was not sudden. Nothing was out of control. He was the one who chose, planned, and stealing. He made his own terms for leaving this world. Only Sharon Osbourne, who had a strategy to make that choice a reality, pulled it off. While everyone was grieving, Ozzy sent out one more message that would change the story of his so-called Mopefest burial. The last wish of Ozzy Osbourne for the better part of his life, the name Ozzy Osbourne was practically associated with mayhem. He bit off bat heads, screamed into stadiums illuminated by flames, and ventured to do things no other rock star had dared to do. When it came time for Ozzy to die, though, his vision was unexpectedly light-hearted. He had already stated his intention to avoid a somber burial service before his health started to decline. Symbols of tragedy and speeches were not what he desired. He desired chaos. He desired appreciation. Above all else, he wanted for his last farewell to have a vibrant energy. A reader of Ozzy's 2011 Times column wondered aloud whether it was morbid to arrange one's own burial. He was. I honestly don't care what they play at my funeral. If it makes them happy, they can put on a medley of Justin Bieber, Susan Boyle, and We Are the Diddy Men, Ozzy classic style said. The twist came when he mentioned wanting to pull pranks. Maybe someone is pounding on the casket door. The diagnosis of death may prompt him to film himself requesting a second opinion from his doctor. Serenity was not what he desired. He was seeking amusement. There will be no harping on the bad times, he said. Here we have an excerpt from the author's book in which he reflects on Ozzy's life philosophy. Addiction, lunacy, arrests, betrayals, celebrity, and a slow-burning illness that robbed him of mobility and speech were all parts of Ozzy's life, when he considered it. In response to the question of how he wished to be remembered, he repeatedly emphasized the importance of being remembered as someone who endured everything. Whoever made it through got to live the high life and be grateful for it. Sharon listened carefully to Ozzy's requests. Press photographers failed to sound the trumpet at the gates, and there were no famous people wearing sunglasses to pay their respects or give eulogies during the scheduled big memorial or television tribute. She opted for a private farewell ceremony that honored all of Ozzy's last desires rather than a traditional funeral. Ozzy allegedly said, "It is the only place I want to be," when he selected the private burial site for the Osbourne family many years ago, and that's where the ceremony was held. No one could watch the service live or listen to it afterwards because it was private. Relatives claim that no one outside of the immediate family and a select few of long-term care workers were present. Sharon planned the funeral in advance, and there were rigorous no-media policies and confidentiality agreements that went down to the last detail. The music, though, was the soul of what made this service truly Ozzy. Each note played was one that Sharon had chosen. However, she chose unreleased tracks that Ozzy had been working on during his lengthy rehabilitation from the 2019 accident that first revealed the world to the slow progression of his Parkinson's disease, rather than his top hits or chart-topping tunes. New music that no one had ever heard before, unmastered, unprocessed, experimental, and reserved for exclusive listening in private. Brief periods. During Ozzy's request in 2023, a heartfelt remix of See You on the Other Side was performed as the final song during the funeral. He whispered instead of roared as a means to say farewell, opting for sound above spectacle. In the midst of the world's mourning for the Prince of Darkness, Sharon had kept her final vow. The day of his departure was never turned into a museum exhibit by her. In honor of Ozzy's passing, it was a carefully planned party with no public display. Everything was unfiltered, just like he had hoped for all along. Even though the ceremony was private and held at a certain hour, there was still some doubt among fans and journalists as to whether or not it appeared to be a natural death. According to the rumors, were there discreet individuals helping with Ozzy's farewell? His happy farewell was dampened by one disturbing fact, though, a secret agreement and Sharon's contentious views on dying. The ever-renewing death pact rumor. It all started in 2007 when Sharon Osbourne talked about her own experiences with assisted suicide in interviews in her biography Survivor, My Story, The Next Chapter. She opened out about how she had to have the tough but necessary talks with Ozzy about end-of-life choices after seeing her father deteriorate from Alzheimer's. She went on to say that they had decided to contact Dignitas, a Swiss group that advocates for medically assisted suicide in certain cases. That was it, we would be off if Ozzy or I ever had Alzheimer's, she declared at the time. The comment became a news headline. For some, it seemed like a wild speculation. Some people saw it in a more literal sense. Though he never directly addressed the details, Ozzy frequently used an interview tone that was funny, dark, and sprinkled with self-awareness, which was consistent with the rumor. However, the rumors gained even more credence with his 2019 Parkinson's disease diagnosis. Now we are in July of 2025. Ozzy vanishes. He passes away at home, surrounded by loved ones, at a funeral that has been meticulously organized, while being fully conscious but unable to communicate. Among them were absence of hospitalization, transfer to an emergency room, or release of medical records to the public. Sharon oversaw all aspects of care as outlined in the advanced care plan that Ozzy had signed, which became legally obligatory. A vindictive spin was added to the earlier rumors, which were quickly revived. The media retrieved the 2007 quotes and combined them with the most recent audio from the Osbournes' podcast because the subject came up again in October 2023 when the couple was speaking about it again. In that episode, Jack wanted to know if they were still planning to fly to Switzerland. Sharon remained steadfast. "In your opinion?" To Jack's question, "Are we going to go through this?" she said. Jack nervously responded with a laugh and said, "Well, maybe. Isn't life already suffering?" Sharon's response was direct. "Mental suffering is enough pain without physical. So, if you've got mental and physical, see ya?" Sharon's tone was darkly humorous, but there was still an implication underneath. Some of Ozzy's admirers have even suggested that his demise may have been hastened. Has the family actually done it? Was it legal to use medical aid and a covert execution in the UK or elsewhere? Kelly Osbourne quickly put an end to the rumors. In an Instagram post made 11 days prior to Ozzy's death, she strongly denied the viral stories, writing, "My mom said to get attention one time, and insisted that her father was not actually dying at the time and that the pact in question had no legal standing." It was barely accurate, but her post only served to further muddy the waters in the days that followed. Therefore, what is the purpose of secrecy? That much power? Why was all press access suddenly cut off? Service, on the other hand, is indisputable. Sharon Osbourne had all authority, legal and otherwise, in and of herself. She was the power of attorney, oversaw all treatments, and oversaw the end-of-life plan. Regardless of, the family did neither confirm or deny that it involved formal assisted dying procedures. As a result of this case, the storyline around the authenticity, exaggeration, or misinterpretation of the so-called contract becomes more contentious. The focus has shifted to the legend surrounding Ozzy's demise, the last mystery associated with a man who spent his career moping about. Sharon's control system, which she had been quietly constructing over decades, allowed her to manage Ozzy's last chapter with relative ease. By the time Ozzy Osbourne entered his twilight years, the anarchy that had characterized his persona had been replaced with a measured and calm order. But Sharon Osbourne was the one who gave the command, not chance or capitulation. His marriage was more than that. She was more than simply his boss. She designed a comprehensive system that kept tabs on his well-being and legacy and eventually preserved them both. At first glance, it appeared to be a commitment. As seen from within, it resembled a fortress, and Sharon was its chief operator. There was no emergency that prompted the creation of this system. It changed over many years. Throughout Ozzy's life, from his solo career after Black Sabbath to his reinvention as a television personality, Sharon had always been his rock. However, her position changed from coordinator to controller as his health started to worsen. After 2010 symptoms of central nervous system decline and a formal diagnosis of Parkinson's in 2019, Sharon started implementing a completely new operational model, more akin to a high-security agency's infrastructure than a celebrity household's. We moved on to the medical treatments. There is a 3-story main residence with 3 groups were formed to provide care. 1 for motor rehabilitation, 1 for neurological support, and a 3rd to treat symptoms. These units all operated on a shift-based system. Sharon stayed away from the public health system and relied solely on private sources to find competent medical professionals. Therefore, none of them were financed by the government. Meals, sleep, and physical activity were all recorded using coded systems due to the extreme degree of control. At the conclusion of each shift, a personal advisory board reviews the encrypted logs for quality control purposes once a week. Unless Sharon herself gives the go-ahead, she will not make any more public appearances. Even during Ozzy's infrequent public performances, they would only be allowed to perform if they could sit motionless, keep their words steady, and display some facial control. These were not frivolous requests. Rather, they were safety measures designed to protect the family's honor and their carefully cultivated public persona. There will be medically prepared event spaces, a pre-approved media presence, and caregivers on hand at all times. When it came to health, Sharon's iron grasp was unyielding. She commanded complete command over all monetary matters, media rights, and even interpersonal interactions. He was in charge of all revenue generation for at least 3 separate businesses: a touring agency, a music licensing firm, and a personal branding organization. Annually, budget models were revised in light of anticipated health problems and treatment expenses. Her name appeared on most contracts in some capacity as a co-owner or agent. Obtaining Ozzy's signature was necessary for any action involving the use of his name for convenience. In addition, there is the matter of legal insulation. Despite widespread agreement to the contrary, Sharon is able to make all of her own medical decisions thanks to an advanced power of attorney that she obtains early in her deterioration. Not only is she the last authority, but she is also the next of kin. With this arrangement in place, she may operate on behalf of Ozzy with access, supervision, and authorization, and no one, not even his extended family, will be able to meddle. In this arrangement, the kids also had separate responsibilities. Communications with the family and social media were overseen by Kelly Osbourne. Jack was in charge of the legal aspects and the protection of digital assets. Amy is more reserved and will only come out when asked. What a gulf in sentiment, isn't it? Does it work? Everyone has a specific job to do. Plus, there's a strategy for the role. Very few have accomplished what Sharon has. The man infamous for total anarchy is leaving behind a legacy that runs like clockwork. No information was compromised or shared. There were no controversies, no embarrassing paparazzi photos, and nobody fell for it. It was held by the fortress. Ozzy finally got the solitude, control, and quiet he craved because of this. However, not even absolute dominance could save their love from the ultimate test: betrayal and the brink of disintegration. Sharon Osbourne had to restore something far more fragile, their marriage, before she could construct the fortress that shielded Ozzy in his dying years. This affair nearly ended everything. Despite enduring the challenges of fame, addiction, and public attention, the couple's relationship was almost destroyed by Ozzy's health. It amounted to adultery. Everything, both professionally and personally, nearly fell apart in the days after the affair was revealed. News of Ozzy Osbourne's extramarital affair with a hairstylist first surfaced in 2016. Sharon was taken by surprise, despite her decades of experience managing Ozzy's career and unpredictable behavior. She quickly distanced herself from him after publicly confirming the affair. At the beginning of their marriage, she was requesting space, not protecting Ozzy. At that very moment, she pronounced their marriage broken, removed him from all of his booked performances, and canceled all appearances. But on the inside, there were a lot more problems. Many people thought that the term compulsive sexual urges was oversimplified and inappropriate for Ozzy's issues, which were really more related to impulsivity and control. Nonetheless, he voluntarily sought treatment for them. In response to Sharon's request, a comprehensive review by both medical and legal experts was initiated. Evidence from the family's own records and letters revealed that this time became a thorough reassessment of the relationship's ground rules. The outcomes were unprecedented. Novel contracts like legal papers emerged. Ozzy was ordered to respect personal boundaries in all his connections outside of his marriage, to allow third parties to oversee his finances, and to avoid making public appearances without prior approval. These were more than just lines on the map. They were legally binding agreements complete with deadlines, fines, and oversight. The message from Sharon was clear: the marriage could proceed according to her conditions or it could not. Now, structure would take the place of spontaneity. Although they weren't directly involved emotionally, The kids did play a big part in the reconciliation process. When it came to their father's appointments, family responsibilities, and media filters, Jack and Kelly Osbourne devised a sort of co-care plan in which visits would be interchangeable. Everything related to privacy protocol and legal interfaces was taken over by Jack. After Kelly had withstood several public storylines, she assumed command of the family's social media messages. While taking part, Amy maintained her position as a silent but steady observer, solely in cases where private planning was involved. Reforming the marriage, in the conventional sense, was not the goal. This marriage was not marked by public reconciliations or extravagant displays of affection. The marriage wasn't healed so much as reorganized, according to Sharon, who described the process as a re-establishment of structure. The whole process of repairing relationships was examined, documented, and signed off on at each step. Living life as one became more methodical than ardent. Sharon resumed her role as Ozzy's manager following the signing of the final internal agreement. Sharon now has the power to veto media appearances, oversee finances, and coordinate medical care. Her personal statements would also take a back seat as she withdraws from any public-facing roles, cancels her attendance at the event, and delves headfirst into restoring the system that once made them a formidable and unexpected rock pair. This is more like a reset than a recovery. A new kind of allegiance has emerged in place of trust. Sharon had no idea what it meant to forgive. It was control, actually. The symptoms of Ozzy's degenerative disease were starting to manifest, so he had little choice but to conform. Instead of wreaking devastation, he chose peace. Once subject to his irrational impulses, the man was now subject to the most strictly enforced schedule of his life. The implications of such a profound, introspective change are far-reaching. Because of this, Sharon had complete control over his well-being, wealth, and reputation for many years until he passed away. That stronghold would not have stood without the devastating collapse and the gruesome reconstruction that followed. No amount of planning could have prepared us for the profound stillness that enveloped us on July 22nd, a day when Ozzy's voice had faded and only his eyes remained during his last hours. With Ozzy Osbourne's decline, unnoticed, for some weeks, he was less able to move around. His words had vanished. A lot of the movement in his face had gone, including the muscles that had earlier shown a mischievous and rebellious expression. However, his awareness remained intact. His loved ones say that in his last hours, Ozzy was completely alert. That, in and of itself, gave his farewell more gravitas than any performance could have. He was scheduled for a last video call in the 3 days before he passed away. It wasn't an impromptu occurrence. It was planned, given the green light by doctors, and made with safety in mind. Jack, Kelly, and Amy, his children, appeared on the screen. A word escaped Ozzy's lips. His voice was taken away by Parkinson's disease. However, he conveyed his message with deft eye movements, nuanced facial expressions, and intense concentration. There was nothing ambiguous about the moment, Jack Osbourne later affirmed. The parting was understood by all. A man who had spent his life yelling into microphones stands motionless, fixated on making eye contact. This is one of the most striking photographs. The stillness, yet, had strength. Substance misuse, anarchy, controversy, and inner demons were some of the challenges that Ozzy had faced over the last many decades. At the last second, he chose to be clear. Stillness. Presence is paramount. During her husband's final hours, Sharon Osbourne was the only one allowed access to him. Until after the death, no one knew about the planned decision. Has no clergy, no doctor, and no one else from the outside coming to see them. Not in her capacity as administrator or executor of his estate, but as the one person he desired to remain devoted and loyal to till the end, Sharon entered the room to be by his side. Ozzy passed away without the use of any artificial means, including tubes, machines, or hospital monitoring, as stated by his family in their official statement. Nobody he could rely on, just tranquility. He and I kept our old promises. There was no intervention from machines. There was no transfer. Nothing was done outside of Ozzy's wishes, Sharon said in the letter that was made public after the funeral last Wednesday. Those phrases held great legal weight in addition to their artistic merit. They verified that Ozzy's demise was dependent only on a prearranged medical directive. Everything from pain treatment to physical therapy had been planned out when Ozzy could still sign paperwork. Sharon was able to come up with a flawless ending. After the 12-hour period had passed in the private room, the corpse was transferred to the designated burial location. A funeral home was hired some time ago. Strict operating rules and confidentiality agreements tied them. Pictures were not leaked. The gate was empty of paparazzi. No one, not even close friends or family in the business, knew when it was. There were no religious decorations or candles in the room where Ozzy passed away. The caregiver who worked under Sharon's contract described it as calm, uncomplicated, and unassuming. At a low volume, a soundtrack of ambient sounds was playing. During the lockdown, Ozzy recorded a number of songs that would later be unreleased. These were songs that he had never before shared with the public and that were written for intimate moments like this. Still a legendary rock band. The end of a human life that has been reduced to its barest essentials: respect, autonomy, and affection. With pinpoint accuracy, Sharon built a wall around him, isolating him from the outside world and fulfilling his every dream. There was no drama around Ozzy's farewell. Although Ozzy Osbourne's passing signified the end of a life, it also commenced something considerably more intricate: the administration of a legacy. Sharon's control over Ozzy's final gift to her served to safeguard his legacy. Plus, it wasn't left to chance, internal strife, or entertainment industry heavyweights, in typical Osbourne style. Sharon Osbourne had it immediately once it was secured, prepared, and safeguarded. He didn't leave her music or cash as a parting present. Power was at play. Absolute control over all that he abandoned. Before Ozzy passed away, Sharon had already established herself as the unchallenged master of his career. Her name was on every record, licensing agreement, and promotional appearance for the brand. Her actions following his passing, however, were not merely commercial. They constituted strategic preservation. There was no press conference regarding his artistic archive, no public list of heirs, and no notification regarding the future of his name from the Osbourne family. In its place, a brief, although a very organized legal collapse that made one thing crystal clear: this legacy would stay inside and unaltered. The will is the first thing to consider. Legal counsel and independently confirmed records indicate that Ozzy's estate had already been transferred into a closed family administration system prior to his passing, away from any outside interference or claims that may be contested. Sharon was fully empowered to administer. However, Ozzy's legacy was divided according to function rather than favor, rather than equal distribution to successors. Kelly Osbourne was granted complete authority over all public messages and media consultations due to her extensive background in media relations. Jack Osbourne, who had been involved in production and digital logistics for a long time, was in charge of all digital assets. This included unpublished concert material, historical recordings, and protected intellectual property. Even Ozzy's unpublished personal recordings, demos, and handwritten lyrics were in his non-commercial music collection, which he created for himself, not for fans, and Amy, the most private of his siblings, had access to it. The catalog, images, licensing rights, and branding restrictions, however, are Sharon's exclusive property. The ability to grant or revoke access to use Ozzy's name was bestowed upon her. Portrait, melody, or likeness. She must be consulted before any tribute tours, documentaries, or merchandise deals are approved, and that command was promptly put into action. Sharon categorically rejected any suggestions for a posthumous endeavor, including requests to establish a foundation in his name or organize a memorial concert in his honor. Nobody outside the family would be able to cash in on Ozzy's legacy or resell it, she wrote in a postscript to their legal case. There would be no monetary prizes, only symbolic ones. The preservation of innocence was at stake, not merely the maintenance of authority. At the very least, Sharon would never knowingly let Ozzy's life be used as a pawn by another. His likeness merited more than a licensing template. Sharon captured the spirit of a man who endured, fell, rose again, and achieved success according to his own rules. Most notably, this final layout included a step-out. She formally quit as manager of the brand after years of operating the Osbourne business. Our tours will not be open to the media. I don't have any books. Absenteeism in the specials. All of her responsibilities regarding Ozzy's assets, medical affairs, and posthumous directions were acknowledged with a single signature on the legal documents, concluding her task. Nothing, just finality, no fanfare whatsoever. It was a subtle but significant change, the end of an era, to her closest friends and family. Quietness and peace triumphed over control and spectacle after decades of micromanaging every aspect. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you were moved by this tale. Leave a comment with your opinions, hit like, and share it with someone who remembers the Prince of Darkness. For the simple reason that even the most audacious lives have their peaceful finales. Sharon Osbourne only ensured that his last performance was tailored to his specifications.